Hello and welcome to Business Morning here on France 24. Let's start as ever with a look at today's main business stories in the world's press. G7 finance chiefs think the subprime crisis bill will be higher than expected, says the UK Financial Times. Speaking after a G7 meeting in Tokyo on Saturday, German Finance Minister Pia Steinbrück said the G7 feared write-offs of losses on securities linked to US subprime mortgages could reach $400 billion. Yahoo tipped to turn down the Microsoft offer. The news is making the headlines of most business dailies today, including the Economic Times of India. The paper says that Yahoo's board considers that Microsoft's $44.6 billion offer was just too low. Now, today, Monday, the Société Générale is to launch a capital increase of 5.5 billion euros to cover its massive trading losses related to an alleged fraud scandal. The French daily Les Echos reports that, meanwhile, the trader allegedly behind the bank's 4.9 billion euro loss has been placed in provisional detention. A second trader working for a subsidiary of the French bank was questioned by police, which the paper says calls into question the bank's own theory that its rogue trader acted alone. Now, US oil giant ExxonMobil said on Friday that it had won a court order to freeze up to $12 billion of assets of Venezuela's state-run oil firm PDVSA. The firm had been fighting for compensation since Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez nationalized the company's stake in oil projects last June. President Chavez has responded, threatening to stop exporting oil to the US if it continues to attack Venezuelan assets.
No stranger to controversy, Hugo Chavez used his weekly television show to issue a staunch warning to U.S. President George W. Bush.
If you freeze us, if you really freeze us, if you damage us, then we'll hurt you. Do you know how? We're not going to send oil to the United States.
A threat stemming from the Venezuelan president's belief that the U.S. is attacking his country via an ExxonMobil lawsuit, freezing up to $12 billion of its assets. The company has been fighting for monetary compensation ever since Chavez seized its stake in big oil projects in the country last June as part of its nationalization drive. Four other major companies, France's Total Group, the US's Chevron, the UK's BP and Norway's Statoil, all accepted Chavez's move, rendering them junior partners in the project. Exxon and ConoPhillips refused. The former is now challenging the nationalization in court. Arbitration is slated for later this year, but Chavez clearly doesn't like being crossed.
We will never be robbed again by the bandits of ExxonMobil. They're imperialist thieves, white-collar corruptors.
Venezuela is one of the U.S.'s major oil exporters, and so far Washington has distanced itself from the Exxon legal offensive. It remains to be seen whether Chavez's bite proves as bad as his bark.
So there's Hugo Chavez threatening to cut off the oil spigot to one of its major markets. I'm now joined by our business editor, Douglas Herbert, to analyse the results of that. Doug, I'll cut straight to the chase. How seriously should we take Chavez's threats?
Well, you know, Catherine, always prudent to put things in perspective when you're talking about Hugo Chavez. I mean, this is the man who's built a political career out of waging war on the country he calls the empire, routinely calls George Bush the devil, has accused him of trying to assassinate him. That said, I think it's unlikely he is going to make good on these threats anytime soon. Venezuela is highly dependent. It's a mutual relationship, a dependency on the U.S. market. It produces 3 million barrels a day of oil, and it exports more than half of that to the U.S. market. But there's a further issue at play here. Venezuela produces a very special type of oil. It's very heavy and viscous, almost like tar. And the U.S. happens to be the place that has the refineries that are best equipped to refine this and make Venezuela's oil sort of marketable. So, you know, you have a lot of things coming together at the same time. The state oil company itself in Venezuela, Petróleos de Venezuela, is right now, this could not come at a worse moment, it's trying to raise funds, about $80 billion, in order to try to double the country's oil production by 2012 to about 6 million barrels.
So a bit of a case, Doug, of you oil my back, I oil yours, despite all of this. But turning to Exxon's role, this is the first time, of course, that a major oil company has gone head-to-head with a sovereign government in court and won.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're here talking about it today. We have seen other big, countries that are trying to consolidate their grip on natural resources. Russia, Ecuador, Kazakhstan, and, of course, now Venezuela. Most cases, we saw it with BP and also with Royal Dutch Shell in Russia, projects in Siberia and Russia's Far East. They sort of accepted the terms. They ceded majority stakes to Russia's Gazprom, state-run oil and gas company. In this case, Exxon and ConocoPhillips, another partner, they backed out, and Exxon then said, but no, we're going to go one step further. We're taking you to court. So this might be a sign of things to come.
Thank you very much indeed, Douglas Herbert. You'll be joining me later in the programme. But now it's time for our daily update of business news in Asia with our Beijing correspondent, Henry Morton. Henry, the G7 finance ministers met in Japan this week, as you've heard earlier, and Asian oil subsidies were high on their agenda.
Yes, the G7 calling for an end to oil subsidies used in China, Indonesia and India during meetings between finance ministers this weekend. The group of 7 looking for ways to ease pressure on prices. The subsidies in those 3 countries leading to artificially high levels of demand while supply remains static. Indonesia looks set to spend $11.5 billion on capping fuel prices this year, with China and India also set to spend billions of dollars in compensation to refiners for selling at below cost prices. While moving to China, and the country's travel agencies may lose 70% of their forecast sales during Chinese New Year because of the heavy snowstorms that have hit the country in the last month. The heaviest snowfall in half a century, which has cost the economy $11 billion so far, saw the cancellation of more than 10,000 group tours and around 50% of the journeys from Beijing. We end in Korea, where growing uncertainty about the global economy has seen investment banks lowering their growth forecasts for 2008. The Korea Center for International Finance expects to see growth of 4.7% this year. That's down 0.3% from initial forecasts in August. Those then are the stories that are making the business news here in Asia today. Have a good day, and I'll see you again tomorrow.
Thanks, Henry. And now to the United States, where Hollywood writers are on the verge of settling a 3-month-long strike that forced the cancellation or postponement of many popular TV shows and movies. With more, I'm joined again by Douglas Herbert, our business editor. Doug, a breakthrough at last, perhaps?
Looks like it, Catherine, and just in the nick of time. This has really been one of the most costly writers' disputes, hundreds of millions of dollars in damage costs to the industry, mostly enforced or canceled, postponed TV series, popular TV series, and movies. But it now looks like, we've seen the Golden Globes canceled, by the way, and the Hollywood Oscars ceremony was also in jeopardy. Looks like the writers have struck a deal. They're going to be voting on the terms of a new contract in the next couple of weeks. They're also going to hold a ballot on Tuesday, tomorrow, to return to work. They could be back by Wednesday. This could be the return to business after a very long and grueling dispute.
So those Oscar-nominated actors will get their role on the red carpet after all. Thanks to Doug. And before we close this edition, let's have a quick look at the world's stock markets. In the US, the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 0.53% on Friday, capping a weekly loss of over 4%. The Nasdaq Composite managed a gain of 0.52%, while the Standard & Poor's Index lost 0.42%. We don't have any Nikkei figure for you today in Japan, since it's a bank holiday there, and the Tokyo Stock Exchange is closed. But that's it from Business Morning for now. Join us again later on today.